Good afternoon, and welcome to the 12 Points webinar for financial empowerment for women. We're so happy to have you join us here today. And I just wanted to point out that in order to ask questions, there's a More button on the bottom of your ribbon. It's got three dots in a circle. If you click that, it'll take you to the Q&A section. And in there, you can write out your questions and we'll see it and answer anything that comes up. So feel free to type in your questions and we'll get to them as I see them as we go along. So I am Deb Cardiser. I am a senior wealth advisor here at 12 Points, and I help women turn wealth into impact. So that's really setting up structures that support their visions for the future, their values, and really what they need their finances to do for them. So whether it's for an individual, a couple, a family, community, or the world at large, people's money needs to do something for them, and we figure out what that is and set up the structures to support them. So my passion is really helping women to get the tools and the education they need to be able to master this part of their lives. So thanks for joining us here today. This is really important, and your participation in this, in your own finances, is super important. And part of it is women are driving the economy these days. So 85% of household purchasing is decided by women, and that's more significant than it's ever been in history. So the women who are the purchasers and the deciders within their household are driving those economic decisions, and that drives a big part of what we're doing economically in this country. The other significant piece of all this is the great wealth transfer that you've all heard about. That's wealth moving from the older generation to the younger generation. And typically before it does, it moves from the men to the women. And so this is a prediction that $30 trillion is moving into the hands of women that has not been there before. So another really significant fact of where we are today. It's different. And then women typically outlive their male partners by 5 to 7 years. That's really significant. So that means that in our lifetimes as females, 80% of us will be solely responsible for our finances at some point in our lives. So really developing the confidence to make your financial decisions and to drive this part of your life is really important because it drives so much of your life. So what typically gets in the way for women? I don't know enough. And women have a tendency to need to know everything and do it really well and master it before they can set out and accomplish things. So knowledge gaps feel like disqualifiers. They are not. And you can start at any point in this. So fear of making mistakes. You need to know that everybody is making mistakes, and you make them along the way and you can correct them. And think about complete, not perfect. So this isn't an exercise in achieving perfection in any way. It's really getting things done and making sure that your money is working for you the way you want. And I think most of us who have a job tend to feel overwhelmed, and financial complexity just feels like a lot. So rather than face it and deal with it, it's easier not to. The biggest mistakes that I see people make and the biggest source of problems in women's lives are thinking that someone else knows better and really abdicating and giving away your power in this part of your life. If I could change one thing that people do, it would be this one. So when people abdicate and have somebody else making decisions for them, this is when mistakes happen. This is when people get taken advantage of. This is when your finances aren't set up to support you and decisions aren't made based on what you would want. So at a minimum, participation is the most important thing. So lack of time is another one that we all face. And really making you a priority is so significant in every facet of your life. And your finances is no different. So making time for this and time for you is really significant. And then we speak in jargon in this industry, and apologies on behalf of everyone for that, but ask the questions. Just because you don't know what a word means, it shouldn't stop you in your tracks. So ask those questions and start learning and participating. So at 12 points, the driver of everything we do is the values behind the individual, the couple, the family that we're working with. And your values are the driver of your money. And this is the most basic starting point for setting up your financial world, is really understanding what your values are. If you're in a partnership with somebody, really understanding how you prioritize different things together and then how you prioritize them individually is really important. So having those conversations is fun, and that changes over time. And this should be fun. What are your values? How do you want to set things up? And then what kind of life are you building? Where do you want your money to go? And deciding those things and deciding what you're working towards and saving towards is really significant and important. And I love to have people do this as a fun exercise. What do you want to make happen in your life? This is a fun conversation and it should be fun. And then what do I want to use my money for? Who is it going to help and benefit? So beyond me, what are the kinds of causes that I want to support? If I've got kids, do I want to support them and educate them? Is that something they're going to do on their own? So deciding all those things, and then in your community, are there things that you want to support? Are there things in the world that you want to, rights you want to wrongs you want to right, or things that you want to support in some way? Really, money is just green crinkly paper until you give it a job. So giving your money a job is really important. So we start with values and then we move towards goals, because the life that you're building, it's going to take steps to get there. You make decisions along the way to weigh out different things and different options that you have. Most of us can't do it all. And then we have the outcomes that we get from all of this. So really, when you set up your financial world to support your underlying values, that's when you are going to have the most satisfying outcome. So the 5 pillars of financial wellness, we start out with cash flow, understanding where your money is going. Then we move to savings. So now you have cash flow coming in. What are you doing to save? And are you paying yourself first? That's really critical. And then putting your money to work for the investing piece. We want to make sure that your money is growing. And then protection. Asset protection is really critical. It's the things like life insurance and health insurance and all those things that bring you safety and prevent disasters from happening, financial disasters. And then legacy. What are you doing to plan for your family, for what happens after you go? What are the values that you're leaving behind, and what are you doing with your money? So those are really important pieces that create the sort of complete financial life. So the first pillar is cash flow, and this is about setting up your money to work for you and to go to the places that you want it to go to. So the first step is understanding where's your money going. So there are great apps for this. There is Rocket Money that you can use the free version. There are banks that can segregate your expenditures and show you where your money's going. There's lots of things that can help you do this, but understanding where your money's going is the most important thing. And then awareness of what that is. Track it. Make sure that your spending is really going and following your intention. So this is, don't think of it as a budget. Think of it really as awareness, and then sustainability. A budget could be like a diet, which is great for the little while it works. And then when it stops, you tend to boomerang out of it. So make sure that your spending is aligned with your priorities. Look at where your money's going, and is it in the right places? Does it reflect your values? So, for instance, our family exercise is to look over our spending and see where chunks are that we don't want them to be. And one of ours is takeout food, and an inordinate amount of our monthly budget goes towards that. And it all has to do with timing and who's working late and feeding kids. And do we really want it there? No, it's not really a high value item for us. So realigning that, and then we slip, and then we have to realign it. So this is a constant thing. It's not set it and forget it. And then creating your spending plan, setting up structures to prioritize your values. You want to make sure that the spending is really touching on your values. If you value experience over things, are you filling your closet with shoes? That's probably not the best way to spend your money, but it may work in the moment. So making sure that the long term, your money's ending up where you want it to be. And then this, as I said before, this is not about achieving some kind of perfect plan or getting yourself in order in some way and having the discipline to make it all work. It's a constant state of flow, and life changes and so does your spending. So just make it a plan to stay on top of this, because this will matter to you over time. And then the next one is savings. And this is about creating a pattern, creating a plan, creating discipline, whatever you want to call it. It's critically important. And each paycheck should have an allocated plan. So your money should be going out in different directions based on what you've decided. And the use of separate accounts here is really important. The first thing you need to do is set up an emergency reserve. So this is 3 to 6 months worth of savings so that when something happens, it's not if, things happen in life, whether it's a tree falling on a car or a job layoff or whatever it may be, there are times that you need this emergency reserve. So if you're solo, 3 months is plenty, probably. If you are in a family, 6 months might be a better thing to aim for, but making sure that you have this, it's sitting accessible and in a high yield savings account somewhere separate from your monthly checking account. Because if it's combined, it tends to winnow away. And then what are your short-term goals? Are you saving for a vacation? Are you saving for something special? Some modifications you want to do to your house, to your wardrobe, whatever it is. Set those things aside and make sure that you're putting money towards them each month. And you should have an overall plan for your savings so that when every paycheck comes in, you've got your retirement savings going, you've got your short-term goals being funded, and they can go automatically when that paycheck comes in. And then with major purchases, looking at, home renovations, education, there are vehicles that you can use, like 529 plans to educate kids, but taking care of yourself and your retirement first and foremost should be at the top of your list. So we tell clients all the time that there are loans for college. They don't make loans for retirement. So making sure that you are at the top of your priority list and your retirement savings is at the top of the list is really critically important. And then what kind of flexibility do you want to have? What kind of flexibility can you afford? If there's excess money at the end of a month, it's nice to put it into a place where you've got it and you can spend it on something, either something specific or something special. But understanding where each paycheck is going and how your monthly allocation is set up is really critical. And then obviously, as you get bonuses and as you get bumps in pay, make sure that you're bumping up your savings, because lifestyle creep is a real thing. And as you make more money, your lifestyle tends to get more expensive. And when you can be deliberate about that and set up and change your savings plans right away, it will matter over time. And then investing. So making sure that your money is working for you and is earning beyond inflation. And I think last month the CPI, Consumer Price Index, was up 4%. So that's pretty significant. And that means the prices for your daily consumption items are up 4%. And that's a lot. So we want to make sure that your savings is outpacing inflation, because at the end of the day, you need to outpace inflation or your retirement plan won't work. So we call compound growth the eighth wonder of the world. So this is earning interest on interest. And when you look at savings and you look at people starting to save early, it's really a compelling argument for starting right now, and teach your kids to save too. That's really important. And risk and reward, understanding that there is volatility in the market, and you don't want to put yourself at the highest risk level and suffer the greatest amount of volatility in your accounts that you're investing in. You want to make sure that you've got your things positioned appropriately for the level of risk you can take on and for what helps you sleep at night. So there are people and places at Fidelity and Schwab and places like that where retail investors have accounts, and you can ask for help on that, and they can give you some advice. If you have an advisor, it's really important to have those conversations regularly. What kind of risk are you taking? And it changes as life goes along and changes. And then making sure you've got a long-term perspective. What we see often is people who get whipsawed by the news of the market volatility and saying, oh my gosh, I've got to take my money out of the market because the market has dropped so much. Well, typically you're behind the curve, and if you sell at that point, you're realizing those losses. So they're on paper and they're not real losses unless you sell during a downturn. So being able to withstand that volatility and understand that you're investing for the long term is really important there. And not timing the market is the key piece of that. So women are different investors than men, and they make very strong investors. And there's a couple of interesting reasons why. Women tend to do more research on the outset to select their assets, and then they'll hold them, and they'll hold them through volatile periods more than men will. And so they tend to do their research. They tend to buy and hold through volatility, and that makes a big difference. And they're focused on long-term goals, and they have less distraction from market noise and the hot stock and what's performing well. They tend to set their portfolios and tweak them over time, and they tend to outperform men by 1 to 2%. So it's kind of interesting that that's the outcome. And yeah, who would have thought that? Given that women tend to rate themselves as less financially comfortable than men. And women tend to also follow their plans more consistently than men do. Men tend to be more stock pickers and market timers than women do. So the discipline that women use here tends to work in the long run. So pillar 4 is a really important one. It's about protection and protecting what you've built. And so we all know about the basic insurances that are available: life insurance, disability insurance, health insurance. These are things that are going to keep you safe and protect you as the events of life come along. Life insurance is important, and you need to know what you've got to protect and replace. So making sure that as you look at your household income, what do you need to replace if your partner were gone from the picture tomorrow? And depending on what you've saved, and you immediately think, oh my gosh, I've got to replace their income. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you simply need to educate your kids or pay off your house or do something so that living on your salary is sustainable. So think about replacement and what specifically you can't afford on your salary alone. And that's what life insurance can replace. And term life insurance tends to be a very inexpensive way to do that. Buying it earlier rather than later is significant. And then as you get older and you have amassed more wealth, turning that term policy into a permanent life insurance policy maybe is really a good idea. And the other thing that we really talk to clients about is in couples, often there's a couple that is slated to inherit family money. And you should ask the family that you may be inheriting from, how does that work? Does that go through the spouse to the children? Or, I'm sorry, does it go through the child to the grandchildren? Or are there provisions to take care of the spouse as well? So if you are the spouse and there are provisions, maybe you don't need to do anything. But if your spouse has a family inheritance, it's a good idea to get life insurance to replace some of what they might be inheriting and to equalize things a little bit. So that makes up for some inequalities in family inheritance. Disability insurance is an important piece too. What happens if you're unable to earn for a period of time? See what your work offers and see if you need supplementation there. Long-term care takes care of you as you age and as you become unable to care for yourself. Long-term care can kick in, and it's come a long way. There are lots of different types of policies available, but if you don't have unlimited wealth and you need to cover your aging expenses on your own, take a look at long-term care because it can leave more money for your family and give you more options. And we recommend talking to long-term care specialists for this because it's significant and the cost of care is significant. Nursing homes in Massachusetts are up above $200,000 a year. So it is a significant expense. Health insurance, making sure that you have that in place at all times for you, your kids, and counseling your kids who are over 26 to get their own is really, really important. And then property and liability. Look at what you own and how it's titled and where are there risks. So this goes beyond just, umbrella policies and things like that and property and casualty insurance. What we're talking about here is where you face liability and how. So a couple of things to think about just by way of example are the car that someone's driving that's registered in your name when you know they have substance abuse problems. They get into a car accident, the car's registered in your name, and suddenly you're pulled into a lawsuit, which could be significant. Another example where people don't have a lot of awareness is they've got a vacation home and they're using it less and less. So now they're renting it out or they're letting family members use it. You have liability there if it's titled in your individual name. So making sure that assets like that, where you do have somebody could come and slip on the banana peel and sue you, making sure that those are out of your name and into an LLC registration, which is a limited liability company. So there are ways to protect yourself from that. So just look at what you own and start thinking about where could something come along or something happen that could put your assets at risk here. And then pillar 5 is legacy. So in terms of the legacy we're talking about here today, it's really how are you leaving your assets behind? What are you doing? What's set up? And what supports are there for you and your family members when something happens to you? And people say to me all the time, oh, heaven forbid something's going to happen. Something might happen to me. Well, it's going to. It happens to all of us. No one gets out of here alive. So making sure you have these basic documents in place is really critical. And we like to make sure that, well, two things to think about. One is review your documents on a regular basis. I like to have clients have a summary. We provide it for our clients and we go over it with them. We review it every couple of years to make sure that the people that they've recommended and put in these roles and they've identified are still the people that they want in those roles, that things haven't happened and somebody hasn't gone around the bend or left your life or whatever. So outside of your estate planning documents are beneficiary designations. So these are things like life insurance policies, retirement plans that have a specific beneficiary identified. And you want to look at these regularly and make sure they're up to date. These assets, these types of assets do not pass through your will or your trust. They're separate. And this is the kind of mistakes that where people get divorced and they still have their original spouse as their beneficiary. You want to make sure that these things get changed as you have life events. And then the basic estate planning documents where your assets actually go through your plan are the will. Maybe you have a trust, maybe not. You've got a power of attorney and a healthcare directive. These are the most basic documents. The will talks about who the personal representative is, who's going to take care of all your things. And you appoint that person to sort of oversee everything. Often it's a partner, a spouse, and then a trusted individual. And you want to make sure that you keep up. That's a really, really time-consuming, important job. And you want to make sure that that is the right person. It doesn't slip as you either age or as, you've got people in your life that may change. The trust is really important. A trust, a revocable trust, which can be revoked and changed at any time, bypasses your will. So if you have assets that are listed at your custodian in the name of your trust, then they go according to the trust document. Anything that's not registered with your trust title in it goes according to your will. So looking at your accounts and seeing how they're titled is really important. And people say all the time, oh, well, I went to my estate planning attorney and I had this whole estate plan drafted up and we have trusts. And we look at their assets and they're in their individual name. Well, after you get your documents drafted, you have to go and retitle your assets and make sure that they're in the name of your trust. So that's a really important step that often gets overlooked. And the trust provides two things. It provides continuity. So if you have your assets going through your will in individual name, you've got to go through the probate process, and that can be time consuming, and that can mean that people don't have access to the money that they need to settle your bills and things like that. So a trust provides the continuity. You don't have to go through that process. The co-trustee or successor trustee takes over and can run that account for you. And the other thing it gives you is privacy. It doesn't go through probate the way a will does. And a will spell out all your assets and who inherited them in Massachusetts. So you want to make sure that if you have assets and you have a trust created, you want to make sure those assets are titled in the name of your trust. Power of attorney is a really important role. This person takes care of all your financial activities, with the exception of the trust. It doesn't control the trust, but it can file tax returns. It can do all the things financially for you. So that document should also be refreshed about every 5 to 7 years, because institutions will get really picky about not accepting a document that's not in the last 5 to 7 years. They'll say this is too old. And look over your parents' documents if they're alive, and make sure that their power of attorneys are current. And then your healthcare directive, this is the person who makes informed medical decisions for you. So they're taking care of you if you are unable to make decisions for yourself. So that's another important piece of things. So making sure that those documents are all together and the people that you've appointed know the roles that they're serving and know where to find your documents. So for retirement, this is really an important thing. And what we want people to focus on here is, what is the vision that you want to create for your life in retirement? And retirement lasts a long time these days, so we don't really call it retirement. We call it sort of a third act. And what we want to understand from people is, what do they want their lives to look like? How are they keeping themselves busy, keeping themselves current, maybe using a lot of their working skills to volunteer and help other organizations? But what do you want your life to look like? And often people spend more time planning a vacation than they do retirement. But this isn't about a specific number. People ask us all the time, how much do I need for retirement if I'm spending X? Well, it totally depends, because what you're spending now doesn't mean it's going to be the same in retirement. We don't know the lifestyle that you want to have, or how much travel you want to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So really understanding, what do you have set up for savings? What kind of income sources are there to bring income to you on a regular basis? And then when can you afford to make work optional and walk away from a steady paycheck? And this is where women tend to feel less confident than men. Only 16% of women feel very confident that they're going to retire with a comfortable lifestyle. And that to me is sort of shocking. So that the more that we can help educate people and women with this, the better, because you don't want to be over saving when you don't have to, when you could be living a different lifestyle now, and you don't want to live a bigger lifestyle now and jeopardize your retirement. So it's a delicate balance, and understanding is the key to that. So get help with this one. And then everyone has transitions they're going to go through, and making sure that you are prepared in advance gives you options. But all of these things mean that you should be revamping your financial life in some way, shape, or form. And even getting married when you're starting out and you don't have a lot of assets, it's a huge transition, because you're merging your financial worlds, and people merge them in all sorts of different ways. So having those conversations and understanding what you want to do and how, and the life you want to live and what you want it to look like, are really important. Divorce is obviously a really significant one. And it's starting over and starting separately, and that's enormous. And same thing with widowhood. And for these two, the biggest piece of advice that I have is, don't make decisions that you don't understand the outcome of. So in a divorce, people will say, oh, I want to have that house so I can keep my kids here. Well, do you understand what that's going to mean for you over time? Do you understand what it costs to keep the house up? Do you understand what else goes with that in terms of capital gains taxes and everything else? These are multi-layered assets that you need to decide on. And in widowhood, it's such a shift and a change because people are coping with grief as well as maybe being thrust into the driver's seat of their finances for the first time. So a huge time of transition there. And then the ones that happen as part of everyday life, career changes, starting a business, caregiving, whether it's for your own kids or for your parents or your parents and your kids. These can take significant tolls on your finances, and we want to make sure that you're taking care of this. And, you know, with the business ownership, we want to make sure that your business is dovetailing with your personal finances and that both are getting the care they need. And with caregiving, women tend to provide those caregiving roles and serve a lot more than men do. So they tend to be adversely affected financially by serving those roles. And there's lots you can do to get paid for your services, even if it's with a family member. But if it's unequal and you're providing the care, there should be some kind of compensation that goes on, even if it doesn't happen until assets are distributed from the parent. But there's ways to make up for that. And then your inheritance that you may receive from family members, or sometimes there's a sale of a business that provides a windfall, making sure that you're planning for that and you have an understanding of what that is before it comes to you, because there's lots you can do to prepare for that. So, what are the things you can do to build your financial confidence? There are 5 things that we've identified here, and the first is to ask questions. Ask questions, ask questions. When I see people sitting silently in meetings, or I've got a new client that isn't really asking a whole lot and they've got it all set, I worry about that a little bit, simply because I think we're not talking about things, or maybe I've said something in a jargony way that they don't understand. But I want to make sure that people ask questions always. And if you don't understand something, stop and ask. It's really important, and it's how you're going to learn. And then, there's so many ways to learn now that you don't have to sit down and read a book about it. You can sit and listen to a podcast. There's podcasts about money that come from every perceivable angle you could come up with. So find out which ones speak your language and which appeal to you, and get an education along the way. You can listen to it in your car once a week or something and really pick up a lot of information. And then making sure you're reviewing your finances regularly. This is how to prevent errors. This is how to prevent scams from happening and things getting siphoned out of your accounts, or your lifestyle creep happening in a way that you don't want it to, or your money being spent in ways that you don't want it to, simply because it's the path of least resistance and it's the easiest way to keep your household running. So look at these things regularly. Make sure you're checking through your accounts for charges maybe that aren't yours, for looking at how your spending is allocated and those kinds of things. And at a minimum, I look at those once a month, and the allocations of the spending I look at every couple of months. So just familiarizing yourself with that is really important. And then building your team and making sure that everybody's communicating with each other. So you've got a financial advisor, you have someone preparing your taxes, you have the person that set up your estate plan. Make sure they're talking to each other. Make sure that when you get your estate plan completed, that you've contacted your financial advisor to let them know you have new documents. When something's happening with your CPA, make sure your advisor and your estate planning attorney know what's going on. Those things are really important, and it's so easy to have an email and put everybody on it. And if they don't need to know, they don't need to know, but you took the time to tell them. So really important. And then I have a friend who used to say, you don't eat the sandwich all at once. You eat it one bite at a time. And that kind of applies here. Take each step one by one. You don't have to accomplish all the steps at once. People tend to think, I've got to make everything right and perfect. You really just need to start. So that's the most important thing here, is just start. And then your checklist. I love to, when I'm working with somebody and we've started together, particularly widows and divorcees who are sort of starting out maybe from scratch, I want them to know what they have I want them to know where it is, and I want them to know how it's set up to serve them or their family. So, do you know what you own? If you had to sort of on the back of an envelope write down what you own, could you do it? And are you accurate? That's really important. Do you have savings? Where is it? What pots are it in? Are they in your savings? And do you have an emergency fund? Super critical. If nothing else, getting that set up and running is a great first step. Do you have your key estate documents done? If you don't, get out and do them and make sure that you keep up with that durable power of attorney document and keep up with changes in your life as your kids grow, that you've got the right people in place. And then what do you owe? I think it's great when people have a spreadsheet of what they owe, what the rates are on these things. So when people talk about mortgage rates, you have a sense of what your mortgage rate is. Is it time to refinance? Is it a point below where you currently are? Well, then that might be a great time to refinance. But having a sense of those things in your head or on a spreadsheet that you can quickly get to is a great way to do it. And it keeps you from getting into trouble with credit card creep as well. Understanding your investments, really understanding how your accounts are set up, how your investments are set up. If you've got different pots that you're saving for, are they invested for different timelines? Making sure that you understand all those things and how it fits into your overall picture. And then what's your next financial goal? What's the next thing you're working towards or saving towards, whether it's short term or long term? Those are really important. And I often send my clients home and say, just go outside, have a glass of wine, sit on your porch, and just dream up what you want to create, because that exercise is really important. And that's where a lot of people don't spend their time. They don't spend their time in the creation side. So the most important decision that you can make is to be involved and making sure that you are participating in your financial life, that you are asking the questions. You don't have to have it all figured out. And this is a work in progress. This isn't I finished this and it's done. It's never done, because life changes. Things in your life change, things that you're in your objectives change, your values may change over time, and the people in your life change. So make sure that your plan is evolving, that you have people there to support you. And if you don't, come to 12 points and ask for our second opinion service, and we can help you set things up the way they should be. And the other thing that I would say to all of you is we have 2 webinars that run every month, and check it out. One is a series just for women. So if you haven't seen our Women in Wealth section, you can find it under our resources tab on our website, and come to our webinars and learn a lot. There's plenty of information here that covers just about every aspect of your personal financial picture. So attending our webinars is a great way to become more conversant in what needs to happen in your world. So thanks very much for joining us here today. And if you weren't able to sit for this, you'll see it in a replay. So look us up on YouTube. We have a 12 points section where you can find out our old webinars as well. So thanks very much for joining us.